Fortunately, we've been able to just plug and play. With 90% of the equipment that these farmers are already using to grow their grain crops, their barley, wheat, peas, canola, we can just plug it right into hemp. So they're cutting with green and red combines.
That's Ben Brimlow. He's the lead agronomist for IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I will talk to Ben and his colleague Gregg Gnecco from IND Hemp. We'll hear all about their farming operations out there in Montana, where they're growing grain and fiber, where they're also planning a great big fiber processing center in Fort Benton. We'll also hear about the plague of grasshoppers that descended upon the crops this year and decimated hundreds of acres. All that and more, but first a couple of nuggets of hemp news from Pennsylvania. Okay, so yesterday, the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, held a press conference in Monroe County about his push to legalize cannabis for recreational adult use. And he talked a lot about hemp farmers and the hemp industry in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania's hemp farmers today are working hard to rebuild a long neglected industry in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, man.
As you might know, hemp was once a very widespread crop in Pennsylvania. We were just talking about how many hemp field townships there are in so many counties all around Pennsylvania, because that crop was cultivated in Pennsylvania for more than 250 years.
Yeah, we know this, but it's great to hear the governor talking about it. And then he invited a hemp farmer up onto the stage to talk about his farm. And we know this hemp farmer. His name is Eric Titus White. In fact, I was just up at his farm a couple of weeks ago for the Hempcrete workshop.
This is a carbon capturing plant. It grows in 3 months. It pulls a massive amount of carbon out of the air and stores it in the plant, which we can then use for medicine, for building materials, which I'm building our farm out of hemp right now. There's some hemp blocks on the table over there. If you look at that hemp block, that's carbon. That's carbon that we pulled out of the air with a plant and put into our home, and it'll stay there forever.
And so Governor Wolf is making the case that we've got to move on recreational cannabis now, or we're going to lose out.
So we either do it now and take advantage of what we can do here in Pennsylvania, or we're going to lose a lot of revenue to our neighboring states.
But this isn't all about money. No, this is about forging a new future for humans on the planet. This is about farmers saving the world. All right, one more thing. I just want to remind you about the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit coming up December 8th and 9th. Going to be virtual this year. Lots of great stuff. I'll have more info about that soon. Wait, hold on. Do you hear that? It sounds like I've got a cricket in the studio. Hold on a sec. Weird. I can't find it. I think it stopped. Anyway, let's get on with the show. Gregg Gnecco and Ben Brimlow from IND Hemp, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, we're doing great. Thanks for having us on, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, welcome. Could you give us each a brief introduction?
Sure. Well, my name is Gregg Gnecco. I live out in Washington State. Started in hemp when Washington State came in 2017, working with growers out here, and then joined the IND Hemp team in Montana earlier this summer,
Cool.
working with IND Hemp in Montana. So I run the sales and marketing side of IND Hemp.
Yeah, and this is Ben. I'm a lead agronomist here at IND Hemp, based out of Fort Benton, Montana, in what they call the Golden Triangle, wheat country. I got started with hemp in 2019 in Washington State. Actually, wanted to get a rotation crop with wheat out there on the Palouse, and got the first dryland trial going out there, and this February jumped on over the Rocky Mountains and got started here in central Montana.
Cool. All right. Well, tell me a bit about IND Hemp. What is the company? What's sort of the size, the scale, all that stuff?
So IND Hemp is an industrial hemp processing company and ingredient supply. It was started to create opportunities for farmers in Montana and across the West. And it was started as a grain processing company, and we're expanding now into fiber processing as well. So we've got a oil seed processing for crushing hemp seeds for hemp seed oil and milling for hemp protein powder. And we've just finished the installation of our dehulling and hemp heart line. So IND Hemp oil seed side is a full-scale ingredient supply company and wholesale hemp food supply company. And we can support about 10 to 12,000 acres of production through that plant. And then we are just moving into fiber processing. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we've just started the construction of our hemp fiber processing plant.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's get right into the farming operation. Ben, can you talk about sort of the acreage that you've got going now, and just give me the lay of the land out there.
Yeah. So this year we were able to contract over 9,500 acres, mostly Montana, but a few of the 3 or 4 farms across the Rockies in Washington State and Oregon.
Okay.
The majority of these are dry land production areas, less than 10 inches annual rainfall.
Yeah.
Maybe around 1,000 acres are irrigated. Yeah.
So when you say dry land, like there's no irrigation at all, or that means that you have to irrigate there? That's
right. When we say dry land, and we're talking over 8,000 acres here, there's not a single ounce of irrigation. So it's all praying for rain.
Right.
And they'll see sometimes out here less than 4 inches of rainfall in the growing season.
Oh wow! And then how does that affect your grain yields?
They're lower than some of our counterparts in North Dakota and Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. However, for the value of the land, for the expectations of the farmer, the economics are working out really well.
So what are you getting like yield per acre on the seed?
So of course it depends. It depends on this non-irrigated crop, on
right.
Dry land crop. It depends on if that cloud lets loose on your field or not. But on average, yields are in that 700 to 900 pounds per acre.
Oh, okay.
Range.
All right. And then, so what, do you contract with farmers, and then Ben, your job is then to go out and check on everybody, or?
That's right. Yeah. So I got the privilege of being the boots on the ground with these guys, planning, seed deliveries, helping get the drill calibrated and fertilizer rates established.
Yeah.
All the way through the growing season, pest control, just observations and recording environmental conditions, all the way to when it goes in the bin and we call them up for delivery.
All right. And so these are farmers they're grain farmers. So it's not like a big deal that they're growing a new crop. They know how to grow crops.
That's right.
Are there sort of hurdles though that they still have to get past, or what are the challenges that these guys are facing?
Yeah. So hemp grows very similarly to other oil seeds like canola, safflower. It's pretty similar how it grows. However, the complexity comes at harvest time, and it's a very delicate seed, and we have to be careful not to damage that shell, that seed coat. Otherwise, we see oxidative issues, and sometimes this is a raw fruit food product. So from field to table, there's no kill steps. So we have to treat it like a fresh fruit or fresh vegetable crop.
Right. Huh. So what do you do to protect it at harvest? Is there like special equipment, or some sort of special head that you need on the combines, or how's that work?
Fortunately, we've been able to just plug and play. With 90% of the equipment that these farmers are already using to grow their grain crops, their barley, wheat, peas, canola, we can just plug it right into hemp. So they're cutting with green and red combines with a typical flex header, draper header preferred over an auger header.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So a pretty easy transition for Western farmers to just get right into this.
That's right. That's right.
And then, so you're doing fiber crops too. Is that like a dual purpose variety, or are you growing separate grain varieties and separate fiber varieties?
Yeah, we're currently growing dual purpose variety, and we only contract with X59, which is known for its high quality hemp hearts and flavor profile, as well as it's a large seed.
Is that a Canadian company?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
X59 is developed by Terramax out of Saskatchewan.
Okay. That's relatively close to you guys. You guys are what, a few hundred miles from the Canadian border?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then so the harvest that you're taking in Washington and what you say in Idaho, is that where else you're growing, or?
We're growing one field in Oregon.
Oh, in Oregon. Okay.
There's 4 other farmers are raising it in Washington State.
Okay, and then hauling that back to Montana for processing.
Yep.
That's got to be a really nice drive through the mountains, though, right?
Oh, it's beautiful. The truckers trying to get over the Rockies is going to be interesting. We'll see how that develops, but that's the plan for now, and the numbers make sense for them to send it over. Not to jump back to your previous question, but you're wondering about X59 and the fiber aspect. X59 is bred primarily for the grain, but we can get good quality fiber off it as well. This fiber, you can't just leave it in the field. Otherwise, when they come back in the fall or the next spring, their no-till drills just would plug up and it would be such a mess.
Oh yeah, right.
So it's what we're doing is we're capitalizing on what the farmer considers a byproduct, those stems. Yeah. And the rest of the world understand, and the grower also realizes the fiber value of that stock. So by collecting and baling that, they'll be able to get additional economic return.
Sure. Do you field red it a little bit, or did you just come and bale it wet?
Yeah. This is the first year we're doing a few trials. Some of the growers will let it ret in the field for a couple months and bale it before winter. Others are going to let it sit over winter like they do in Canada.
Right. Huh. Do you see a time when you would be sourcing your seeds from a domestic seed company?
Yeah. So far, our domestic genetics have a little bit to catch up. Mm-hmm. But there are companies that are developing American derived germplasm and developed varieties.
Cool. You mentioned like weed and insect pressure. What's that like? I know you guys had some crazy grasshoppers this year. Mm-hmm. Tell me first about like the weed pressure, and then I want to hear about the grasshoppers.
Yeah. So weeds are, of course, are one of the biggest threats to agriculture. Even though we've got umpteen hundreds of chemical chemistries that are developed for weed control, they're still our biggest enemy in agriculture. The Midwest, I'd say, and other areas with high moisture have even more problems. But Montana, we still have some issues with weeds. The beauty is hemp gets planted later than most of the other crops. Mm-hmm. So most of the time we see good burn down before seeding. Okay. And they come in, seed the hemp, and it covers the ground so nicely that there's very few issues with weeds in Montana, at least.
They just don't get the sunlight, and they sort of get outcompeted. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the burn down. Do you do conventional and organic farming out there, though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. What's the sort of split? Is it 50-50?
It's almost 50-50. Yep.
Okay.
A little more conventional, but the demand for organic is growing, and Montana's, I guess Montana's the number one state for dryland organic production.
I did not know that. Is that a challenge for farmers to wrap their head around, like switching from conventional to organic, or are they already established as organic growers?
They're already established as organic growers. Yeah, okay. It's been pretty popular here.
Yeah. What types of weeds do you have out there? I mean, I'm sure it's way different than what we've got out here in Pennsylvania.
Our biggest weed pressure is kochia.
Kochia.
Prickly lettuce and kochia. occasionally we'll have, volunteer wheat, which would be considered a weed, or wild oat. But those have been the primary weeds of concern.
Right. Now let's talk about the insects. I saw that story in Hemp Grower about the grasshoppers.
Yeah, we knew the grasshoppers were in town, so to speak, this spring. In June, July, we'd see these tiny little grasshoppers hopping around, not doing anything. And I went on a quest to figure out what we need to do about these grasshoppers. Called Canadian industry members who've been raising hemp for decades, and talked to our neighbors out in North Dakota and Minnesota, who also are a similar production region. And I was told, grasshoppers can be a problem. They're a problem, but they're rarely ever cross a damage threshold where you have to spray for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of kept that in the back of my head. But as we started approaching into July, we realized we had an issue, a problem in our hands, and finding cost-effective labeled insecticides was nearly impossible.
Yeah.
I found all the products we needed. However, when we brought the option to the farmer and he saw the price, he couldn't swallow that pill. So
yeah. So what sort of like acreage of damage are we talking about?
We've lost over 500 acres complete loss.
Wow.
I'd say close to 1,000 very significant damage, to the point of not recovering input costs.
Wow. So they just like chewed it down to like little sticks, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. We had one producer just up the road here, and you saw the photo in that article, where she had 700 acres under irrigation, and everything under irrigation. We just kept that water rolling, and it suppressed the grasshoppers right under the water. However, up to the line where that end boom was hitting, it ate. It looked like a stubble field.
Yeah.
All the way up to that irrigation line, and then it turned beautiful green again. It was incredible.
What's up with that? Like the water was just enough to just keep them off of the plants?
Huh. So in central Montana, July, August, it's dry as a bone, and grasshoppers, what they're looking for is actually moisture. They're not so much looking for carbohydrate.
Okay.
It's more moisture, just to survive till fall, when they begin to lay their eggs. So their feeding habit is reduced underwater, as well as it agitates them. It agitates their joints. It interferes with their feeding. So they don't feed as heavily under irrigation.
All right. Maybe the CBD content of the hemp flowers might have helped them with their joints.
I've wondered, yeah, possibly. Yeah, I was hoping maybe, the THC, or, there's no THC in X59, but there's, 2% or whatever CBD. I was hoping there'd be something there to calm them down, but no. They ate, they ate it down to the nubs.
So was there like could you hear them munching? Like when you're out in the field surrounded by grasshoppers, what did it sound like?
Yeah. Well, it's mostly them flying. It's
like a buzzing.
It's a buzzing sound, correct? Okay. When you walk into that field, it's just like a cloud of insects rising up and flying 20 feet wherever you walk. It's just
so that kind of fit in with like the the spirit of 2020, right? Oh yeah,
right.
Plague of grasshoppers. Sure.
That's right. Especially after we lost 500 acres of hail.
Oh,
like, all right,
you had hail damage too.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So
But
we're waiting for the Missouri River to turn to blood, and
God, it didn't. Oh.
One of the great things, despite all the challenges, we're obviously all catching up with hemp production in the U.S. to our Canadian neighbors that have been doing it 20 plus years. And
Yeah.
one of the things we tasked Ben with, when we brought him on and gave him such a responsibility on so many acres is, okay, Ben, you got to catch up, at least 5 or 6 years of that history in one. And I think he's had the experience and really seen a lot of different things across multiple production zones and a lot of acres.
Right.
And we've been finding out things that no one else has found out. For example, these grasshoppers, this is truly unprecedented. It's never happened where we've seen total farm loss.
Wow.
on these pests.
And so, I mean, it's probably not going to happen next year, knock on wood, but at some point in the cycle, it'll come around again, and you'll have that knowledge to build on.
That's right. Right. As soon as winter comes, or actually, I'm already begun the process of finding real solutions that our farmers can use.
Okay.
To address grasshoppers next season. Yeah.
Tell me again how many farmers you're working with, or maybe you didn't tell me that.
We work with 30 contracted farmers, and there's other farmers who just wanted to buy seed and didn't contract with us. But 30 contracted farmers that we deal with directly and coordinate with.
Right. Now, are those guys going to get into fiber next year? Because you are building this decortication plant, right?
Yeah. So these farmers are going to be our grain, of course, our grain growers. However, we want all the fiber we can get. So most of them are planning again to raise grain hemp next season, and they'll be raising that fiber as well. I don't believe any have plans to raise fiber specific variety.
Right.
But yes, each one of them are managing their crop in a way that they're thinking about that fiber and planning for that.
Cool. And then how, like, once all of your processing facilities are up and running, what does full production look like? I think maybe Gregg had mentioned a number of like the acreage, but how many farmers could you be working with, and how many acres of hemp? We technically could work with, if hemp becomes popular, we could work with as few as 15 or 20 farmers. They'd just be increasing their acreage for into hemp. Okay.
However, we want to give as many growers an opportunity to build their knowledge, and if we need to increase capacity, we will to however much we need. So, and Gregg could comment on that as well.
Yeah, and really, I've learned mostly on the acreage from Ben, and I think Ben, I'm going to throw it back at you to kind of explain, because I think a lot of, especially the East Coast growers, don't really know the scale of the multi-generational Montana farms and how much these guys are taking into hemp. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what's a normal kind of size range for these multi-generational farms that we're working with in their total acres, and how much of that is in hemp, so people can kind of see the scale that we're working with.
So many of these growers are raising well over 5,000 acres and up above 20,000 acres a season. So they're pretty large operations.
Yeah.
So in contrast, to jump in, we see with growers in the Northwest that have smaller acres, a lot of guys are kind of willing to take 8 to 12% risk with hemp. That works out to be about 60 acres, where, that same kind of 10% risk in Montana is, hey, I'll give it a go. Let's put 200 acres in.
Right.
And that 200 acres for a Montana farmer is still just a small piece of their total operation. So they're not necessarily betting the farm on hemp, even though they're putting in a couple hundred acres.
Right. Have you had any farmers who just put it all on hemp?
We do not. I highly recommend against that. It's just, that's bad farming to just jump into one crop. That diversity is essential. Yeah.
Good answer. Yep. Good answer. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Yeah.
and scaling it up is a challenge. We talk about harvest challenges and the need to, get grain in and get it dried down and get it cleaned. that process is significantly more challenging as you scale up. 100 or 200 acres is one set of challenges. 1,000 acres is another set of challenges in the quality. So that's part of Ben's role is, he actually qualifies all of the growers that we work with. And, we're not just running out chasing anybody that'll take a contract. We really are trying to be smart about helping people with their operation and trying to give them an opportunity, but not, back them into a corner where, look at this year. If you went all in on hemp and you lost a third to hail and a third to grasshoppers, you're out of business.
Yeah. Scary stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one thing I value so much about IND hemp that stands out. I'd say in the industry is it's a long haul. We're in for the long haul. Right. There's no fly by night kind of deal here. We're part of the community. We're right here in Fort Benton. If the farmer needs to find us, we're right here, and we need to be responsible with how we contract and make sure our growers are successful or at least are secure.
So in the supply chain, like you're developing the supply chain out there, what are some of the weak points in the supply chain?
It's hard. I would say we're so new, we're still figuring out where the points are. The thing about the scale that IND Hemp is doing, I will say the weak point right now is launching. We came online with our oilseed facility right at the beginning of March, right as the whole world shut down. So I'd say the biggest issue for us was actually our go-to-market strategy when Expo West was canceled and all in-person trade shows have been canceled. And, IND Hemp started from the beginning of the supply chain. And that started with finding the right area of growers to work with, finding the right area to locate the facility, and then securing the genetics. IND Hemp is the licensee that represents the X59 variety in 35 states in the U.S. And we're not actively a seed seller. We secured that so that we could offer our growers an affordable price for that seed and guarantee that we have consistency across the supply chain. Right. So when we started in the beginning, we knew that, there are a lot of smaller operations, and to enter the mainstream market, a lot of these larger food companies that have been using hemp in their products for years, they've got supply chain partners, they've got existing relationships. And if we want, most of that is Canadian, some of it's Chinese or Romanian. But if we want to make an impact and really connect the American farmer to that supply, that's the goal that we're working with. And to do that, we have to scale up and get our quality and availability to that level where one of these big companies would look at it. So it's an interesting model going from 0 to 100 quickly. But in order to really build an industry, somebody had to take that risk. And Ben and I are fortunate to work for a great company that was willing to invest in that. And as Ben said, we're building the future for hemp seed foods, even if we're a little outsized maybe for where the market is right now.
Right. But I imagine there's some big companies who are very interested in what you're doing, who want to source, domestic product, right?
Yes. And it's interesting because we're all in this because we're trying to connect, American farmers to the supply. And one thing we've learned in hemp foods, there's a lot of momentum with hemp, obviously becoming legal. And, I haven't seen it recently, but the numbers that have been shared for a couple of years is less than 1% of Americans even know that hemp seed foods exist. That's not even the amount of people that eat them. And yet for 20 years, we've imported 65% of the total Canadian production. So, wow. And most of those people, your early adopters that have been eating hemp seed foods for years, that found Manitoba Harvest or Nutiva, 10 years ago, they're still buying those products. They're happy. They go to Costco, they buy their Manitoba Harvest. And really what we're seeing with the opportunity is people that are becoming more awakened to the possibilities of hemp seed foods. Obviously, plant-based proteins are a big category right now, and hemp is the most nutritious and digestible of all the plant proteins. Has all 21 amino acids. And so there's multiple things converging. but it does take, the consumer to support it. So back to your question, yeah, there's companies that are definitely focused on that American grown process. The next stage of it is we really need the consumers to start buying American and supporting those brands.
Bingo. All right, let me just reintroduce you guys real quick. So Gregg Gnecco and Ben Brimlow from IND Hemp, which is headquartered in Fort Benton, Montana. So what kinds of regulatory concerns do you have? Like, is the THC testing threshold ever even an issue for you guys?
Well, I'll tell you what, with the varieties that we're growing, and one of the reasons why IND Hemp invested in a reputable known grain variety is when you're growing 9,000 plus acres and contracting those farmers, we can't give them any question marks on compliance. It's just too big. And so the Canadian grain varieties that have been proven, X59, and I would say this as well for, the well-known HGI varieties, they've been proven and tested and are exempt in Canada. And really that's, if we talk about regulation, and, it's timely right now because, we've just had an opportunity to add more comments to the IFR. And, most people are commenting about the 15-day testing window and, the 1% THC or how they're going to regulate that. And really what we proposed as grain growers and tried to get some of the other grain companies to speak and voice as well is, hey, back up a bit, USDA. Look to the north, to the Canadians, that really that is the market that we're in. We're in a grain market. We're competing with that market. And we want to be regulated more like Canadian grain and less like American CBD.
Right.
And the way that happens, and really our proposal and our comments to USDA, and if anybody else is out there and can reinforce the comments, is, hey, back up a little bit and let's create a pathway for certified seed and exemptions tied to that certified seed. And one of the reasons why USDA couldn't go there in the first place is there's not enough research, and the United States has so many latitudes that you'll never be able to approve any variety for the whole country. But that shouldn't preclude the areas. One thing we've learned since 2014 pilot program and is that grain hemp is going to be grown where grains are grown. And that's the plains, that's northern Minnesota, North
the
Dakota,
breadbasket,
Montana. And those areas, we're in the latitudes that those varieties work. And we've got data going back, in some states, North Dakota probably being the oldest, of these same varieties grown in the U.S., grown in these states that we're working with, and never going hot. And so really what we're trying to work with USDA is we need to regulate grain and eventually grain and fiber hemp differently than cannabinoid hemp, because we do have different challenges and we have different types of crops.
Yeah. I'm trying to picture the Pennsylvania sampling testing model at work in Montana, where the Department of Ag sends a person out there to take some snips of the plant. And that just wouldn't be feasible out there on the scale you guys are growing.
I will say Montana, the state of Montana and the Department of Ag in Montana really built the Montana program for industrial hemp. And they have different classifications in the Montana program. So Montana actually recognizes as a Class A that they'll recognize a certified seed that's proven. And I don't know off the top of my head, so don't quote me on the numbers, but if you're a Class A, they test a certain percentage of the fields. If you're a Class B seed, they test a greater percentage of the fields.
Right.
And if you're a Class D seed, or a C, which would be an unregulated, uncertified seed, they would test 100%.
Okay.
And really that's what we're trying to share with USDA, to back it up and think about the seed to plant 10,000 acres. It's about 400,000 pounds of planting seed.
Wow.
That equates to about 10 semi-trucks of planting seed that we imported. And for IND hemp growers, all 10 semi-trucks of seed were raised by the same seed breeder of the same certified variety and planted in the same latitudes all across Montana. So in short of full exemption for these known varieties, what we would like to see USDA do is look at it like Montana does and say, hey, IND Hemp has 30 growers growing 10,000 acres of all the same seed. Go take a random sampling across the state because they're all going to be the same.
Right. Just to prove it. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of feel like the CBD industry kind of was a surprise to the hemp industry in general. It's like when they set out with the the 2018 Farm Bill was like industrial hemp. It was going to be for fiber and grain and that sort of stuff. And then along comes the CBD stuff and just threw a wrench in. And it's valuable, sure. Like there's markets there. Well, at least there used to be. But it should be, yeah, you're right. It should be just regulated differently because it's just a whole different style of growing, different mindset, different genetics. So yeah, I smell what you're stepping in.
I mean, it's a bit of a yin and yang, I would say, because I think all of us in grain and those that are developing fiber, to get into grain and fiber, it's huge infrastructure. You know what I mean? It's a huge commitment. And I don't think we would have gotten federal legalization without CBD. You know, you needed that rush and all these other people entering the market and being in the ear of, you know, Mitch McConnell and others in these other states. You know, it was CBD that got hemp legal. So on that side of things, we're very grateful for what CBD's done. But on the other side of that coin is that CBD's created a lot of confusion, both regulatory, you know, in how we want to be regulated as a grain and fiber crop, and as well in the consumer market. You know, prior to CBD, hemp seed oil has been called hemp oil and has been sold as a supplement for more than 20 years.
Right.
And now if you say hemp oil, everybody thinks about CBD. So in the food product side, we're actually having to focus on calling things hemp seed oil and creating those designations because, you know, it's odd because since hemp has become legal, it's actually become more challenging for hemp food companies because of all the confusion that hemp has brought to the market.
Sure. Yeah. What else could the government do to help the industry achieve sort of full potential?
Well, that's like you rub the genie lamp and I get to make one wish. I would say if we had to boil it down to one wish, one of the biggest sticking points right now in the country is animal feed. And I think a lot of people don't realize, including I would say most legislators, don't realize that when we legalized hemp for production, on the same day the Farm Bill was signed, the FDA approved the grass, which is generally recognized as safe, applications that Manitoba had done for hemp seed foods. So that includes hemp heart, the raw shelled hemp seed oil, and the different hemp protein powders. So with that designation, hemp is a normal ingredient, just like sugar or flour or anything else that you can buy and put into another ingredient. You can go to the grocery store right now, buy a bag of hemp hearts, you can take it home and feed it to your infant or your grandmother. But the way feed is regulated in the US is a completely different channel. And so even though those foods are legal to take home and feed to your infant, it's technically not legal to go home and feed it to your cow and then either drink or sell the milk from that cow.
Right.
And the unfortunate scenario that we're dealing with is that the government really believes that even if you harvest a legal compliant hemp crop that was tested by the state at less than 0.3 when it came out of the field, and even though the GRAS definition of hemp seed foods have a minimum or a maximum threshold of 10 parts per million of any cannabinoids, and really that's just any cannabinoids that might be on the outside of the hull when it's pressed, because genetically, until the seed sprouts, there are no cannabinoids in the seed. The genetics of the seed are all there just to promote life. So you've got a product that was harvested compliantly, is a food product compliant for feeding to people, but the government believes that somehow THC might compound in the meat or in the milk and somebody might get high if you feed animals. So yeah, if there was a wish list right now, really it comes down to research, and the universities are lined up and reared to go.
Sure.
And the next step is funding. And what most people don't realize is that in order to gain approvals for animal feed, we have to do a full life cycle study of each ingredient for each species. So while humans can eat all these hemp seed foods, the first application that has just been completed and submitted is for poultry, for both layers and broilers.
Yep.
And that's using the hemp protein. And that'll be the first. So we're looking at about 3 to 5 years probably, and a few $1 million just to prove to the government that animals aren't going to die if they eat this, and that humans aren't going to get high from the milk. It's
so crazy. I mean, you got to think that humans and animals have been eating hemp seeds for thousands of years. You know, it's like probably a major staple food crop for a very long time, but whatever. Yeah. Ben, getting back to grain farmers, what are some of the other like big challenges that you guys are facing?
So well, first of all, it kind of goes in line with your last question and regulation. Insurance is one thing I'm working on to help educate. A lot of these insurance programs are federally supported,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to help these growers get the same protections that they get when they farm, say, a wheat crop or a pea crop or barley crop.
Right.
So that's a challenge that we're going to be addressing and trying to solve going forward. The other thing is I mentioned it briefly before, is the importance of getting this grain stored safely. And a lot of farmers can pile their wheat up on ground piles or their barley should just throw it in a bin. For hemp, we literally have 4 hours from when you cut that seed off the field to getting it in a bin on air and drying down. It's a critical stage that has been probably one of the biggest challenges to our producers.
Because it gets hot, right?
Right, correct. Especially if they're harvesting at moistures in the teens.
Right, and we're not talking THC hot. We're talking about hot.
That's right.
It's going to combust.
Yeah. We've already had a couple experiences where thought we had a little more time than they had, and and it can spoil in the truck.
Wow.
So that's been a challenge. But if I always point to the Canadians and show that they've been successfully doing it for 20 years and producing good product, and we have the same ability, and we can get there quickly. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's see. So you guys are your headquarters are in Fort Benton, right? That's the name of the town. Mm-hmm. You're right on is that the Missouri River? Or you have I'm looking at a map right now.
Yeah, the birthplace of Montana. Yeah.
Okay.
Fort Benton is the uppermost location where the stern wheelers were able to go. So Lewis and Clark, on their trek out west, this is where they hopped out of the river and began their overland journey. And it's the birthplace of Montana. And as Senator Tester here said at our fiber groundbreaking ceremony, the birthplace of Montana and the birthplace of hemp in Montana now. So we like to, at least grain hemp, we like to acknowledge that history. And
yeah, that's awesome. So you guys have the grain processing center, but you just mentioned that you had a groundbreaking ceremony this summer, and you're putting in a big fiber processing plant. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, we'd love to talk about that. And really, that's what everybody's really excited about. It probably gets us the most attention. So going back to what, I really want to tie it back to the why. And when Ben was talking about the grain growers in Montana being no-till growers, mm-hmm. and having to deal with the straw after growing hemp, as you know, it's, the strongest fiber in the world, which is great if you have a way to process it. But if you're just trying to drill a wheat crop into it, it really is a problem.
Yeah.
And so the initial look at fiber for IND Hemp was, can we create a processing infrastructure that would give another revenue stream to our growers while also giving them a pathway to clear that stuff off the field? Most people don't talk about it, but a lot of the hemp grain that's grown, in Canada and around the world, they actually burn off all that straw, like literally lit on fire burn off, not a chemical burn off. And,
wow.
It's one of those things that's not talked about much in the industry when we're talking about regenerative practices and carbon sequestration. You don't get to sequester the carbon if you burn it back in the atmosphere.
No, that's kind of the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just how things have been. So our initial look was giving that straw an outlet. Mm-hmm. And so IND Hemp started looking into, fiber processing, and I'm going to go through the story a little bit to give the context.
Yeah, please.
And it was last fall when, we were put in touch with some of the guys in Kentucky that were involved with Sunstrand. And there was actually a time when IND Hemp was looking at, maybe partnering in some way or investing in some way there. And it didn't really make sense for IND Hemp to be in Kentucky. But we liked the relationship, and we learned a lot when we were working with those guys down there. So IND Hemp actually purchased some of the initial equipment from Sunstrand, from one of those Kentucky plants down there. But then one thing led to another, and fast forward a little bit, that equipment was never actually moved from that, and that equipment was actually traded back through the manufacturer towards another line that was about twice the size. So there's still an opportunity for somebody to go back into Kentucky and kind of restart that line, and it's still in the building. And so the decision was made at that facility that it would be better for somebody to operate that in Kentucky than to try to move all that stuff to Montana.
So you traded up. You've got better equipment up there.
Yeah, so we traded up. That line that was in that plant down there was a La Roche line. La Roche, people can look up. They're a leading fiber manufacturer out of France. They do equipment for hemp and for flax and for jute and for canaf and all of these kind of bass fiber plants. And that was a 2-ton line that they had down there, and we were able to trade up towards a 5-ton line, so about 2.5 times the size. Because once we started learning from them about the potential and what it would take, and if we were going to build something, we really wanted to be at Montana scale. So we secured that equipment. The equipment is actually owned by IND Hemp. It's actually already on U.S. soil. We're coordinating the logistics right now to get it out from the East Coast to Montana. I think we're going to be able to do some train intermodal loading, but with the initial quotes for truck loading, we're looking at 60 semi trucks just for the heart of this equipment line.
Wow.
And that doesn't even include all of the the conveyors and the bale breakers and everything before the line, or any of the final stuff after the line. That's just the key part of the line. So that's the core of the system, is a 5-ton La Roche line. And we're building a purpose-built facility. So we partnered with the city of Fort Benton, and literally right down the hill across the street from our oilseed facility was a yet-to-be-developed industrial area within the city of Fort Benton. And so the city is working on an economic development grant to connect the roads and the sewer and the power for us on the utility side. And then we're developing from the ground up. They're actually out there scraping ground right now, racing to get footings poured before the freeze, to build this building. And then also develop about 10 acres of property that we're calling the Montana Hemp Campus. That essentially, IND Hemp is a first step processor, is what we call ourselves. We work, we've got Ben working with the growers, and really our part of the supply chain starts at the farm. And we've got the relationships. As Ben said, all of our growers that were successful this year want more acres next year. We are in the place with the relationships to grow to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of acres over the next few years. So we start with the scale and the reliability of our producer base and investing in those relationships. And then our role, both on the oilseed side and the fiber side, is to bring that material in and get it through the first stage processing and turn it into materials that others can then use downstream. And our hope is that other companies that, fiber products, whether it's, bass fiber or the herd, it's fairly lightweight for the size of volume it takes. So it's not the most efficient to ship.
Right.
And really what we see is developing, a little location for hemp companies there in Fort Benton. And, we're already talking to some guys that are doing injection molded plastic with some of our materials. A lot of the hemp building companies obviously are looking for the herd for hempcrete, but there's also, insulation products like the hemp wool product.
Yep.
And really we're hoping to attract, one or more secondary processors or finished product manufacturers to locate in that industrial park with us as well, and have their supply right there and their ability to create added value products and bring them to market.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. That seems to be like the model, like in different regions of the country, have the processing close to the farms and have the manufacturers close to the processing. It's like the whole thing is dependent on the local supply chains.
And that's really the strength that we have in Montana. Central Montana is pretty far away from everything except the farm.
Right. So, and then this decortication facility, when's it going to be fully operational?
Well, just like in farming, it all comes down to the weather. And things get cold pretty quick in Montana. But everything right now is if we can get our footings poured before the ground freezes, then we can stand up the building over the winter, and we expect to be commissioning and operational early Q3, July of 2021.
Okay.
And really the plan for that, and I'll touch on it a little bit, going back to what Ben was talking about with the farmers and baling the straw. I know you've talked to others as well, and the hard thing with fiber processing is that the infrastructure is huge. It's millions and millions of dollars. And yet to feed a plant, so for a 5-ton line, we're talking about, at full operation, 3 to 4 semi trucks of bales a day.
Wow.
If we're running around the clock.
Mm-hmm.
So the size to feed that machine is huge. And the hard thing that a lot of people have, and if you look at the other guys trying to stand up fiber processing in the country, is it's really hard to invest in the infrastructure while also investing in the agronomy for fiber specific.
Yeah.
And, we've got some trials in. Ben's already working with some fiber specific varieties and figuring out what will grow in Montana. But the benefit that we've got going into this is that we've got, over 9,000 acres of dual purpose that is going to get baled this year from our grain crop. And that's going to give us a feedstock to commission the plant on and give us material that's helping the farmer out getting that straw out of their field, giving them a secondary revenue stream for that grain, but really giving us a feedstock to get the plant up and going without really having to commit 100% to fiber-only production. That, we're still learning the varieties, we're still learning the economics. Obviously there's a lot of hungry markets for hemp fiber products, but there's a big step between committing to a farmer to grow a couple hundred acres and knowing how those economics are going to work for that grower. So we've kind of hedged the infrastructure by committing to the dual purpose as an initial feedstock, and we'll start moving into fiber specific production to complement that in 2021.
Right. All right. So here's a question, just general question about IND hemp. Like, why hemp in general? Like, you guys could probably make way more money growing other crops, right? So why hemp?
Well, I guess we each have our reason why we jumped into this. For me personally, it's about that crop. There's so many uses from the stem to the seeds, and I see it as a gateway into more sustainable agricultural practices as well. We successfully see organic fields here with cleaner lower weed populations than our conventional neighboring fields. Mm-hmm. It has potential to dramatically decrease, chemical applications, increase soil tilth, and produce a incredibly nutritious product and sustainable fiber. So I was sold when I heard about the potential for this crop in that regard.
Right.
And I'll answer more from kind of the business why.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out that IND Hemp is a mission-driven company. And within our mission, it essentially, and I'm not going to quote it word for word, but essentially we exist to create opportunities for our farmers and to connect them to the innovators that are using hemp into the supply chain in a way that benefits our communities and the planet. And point blank, to answer your question, yeah, there's a lot of other ways that you could invest some money rather than a hemp, processing plant or a hemp fiber plant. But really, hemp is an opportunity for Montana farmers. And, going back to that mission, IND Hemp was started by Ken Elliott and his wife, Julie Elliott, and his daughter, Morgan Elliott. And yeah, they could be doing lots of other things. But, I think you can probably remember, Eric, even in the earlier years of hemp, there was always these, hey, have you heard what's happening in Montana? I think it was 2018 that Montana had 22,000 acres and had more production than Colorado or Kentucky.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was companies coming in from outside and leading farmers down the road to bad deals. The majority of those acres in 18, the company traded hands and none of the contracts were, honored. And Ken saw an opportunity that, somebody had to do something and create the infrastructure so that hemp could be a viable opportunity for the farmers. And as Ben said, in Montana, even at, 600 pounds an acre, Montana wheat farmers can be profitable. They don't have a lot of options for rotation crops there. So yeah, I mean, I will say, we are a business, and, we need to engage with downstream markets and grow our customer base and work with great companies. But at the end of the day, it's not all about the money for IND Hemp. We need to earn the money to support the business. But really, at the end of the day, when Ken and Julie and Morgan look at the year and what we've done, did we do right by our farmers, and did we increase the opportunity? So, we need to be a successful, profitable business to do that. But really, we measure our success every year by, were we able to create more opportunities for our growers and help out a little bit?
All right, there you go. Thank you to my guests, Gregg Gnecco and Ben Brimlow from IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana. I'll have links to their stuff and some photos of that grasshopper damage on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. So that does it for me. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. And thank you for listening to our show. I do appreciate it. I know you have other options of things to stick in your ears while you're doing stuff, but I appreciate you listening to this show. If you like our show, share it with somebody that you think will also like it. We are always looking for new audience members. All right, well, thanks again. Until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper. Episode 104 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.